The alarm screamed through every corridor of Research Station Helios 7. And the sound was unlike anything the crew had heard before. This was not a drill. And this was not a minor emergency. The red warning lights flashed in patterns that made every alien on the station freeze in terror. Because those lights meant only one thing: Specimen Zero had escaped. Commander Vexler stood in the command center, his forearms working frantically across multiple control panels as data streams flooded every screen around him. His reptilian scales had gone pale, a sign of extreme stress in his species, and his voice cracked as he shouted orders to his crew. "Seal all sections immediately," he commanded. "Deploy armed response teams to the lower decks and get me visual confirmation of the specimen's location." Dr. Kira Noss skittered into the command center on her 6 legs, her insectoid body trembling so badly that her wings buzzed with involuntary motion. "Commander, the containment field did not just fail," she reported, her voice a high-pitched whistle of panic. "The creature broke through it and the barriers, and everything we put between it and the rest of the station." Vexler turned to look at her, and his yellow eyes held something no one had ever seen in them before: fear pure. Undiluted fear. "Show me the footage," he demanded. The main screen flickered to life, displaying security recordings from the containment sector. What they saw made several officers in the room make sounds of distress. The Varth, the deadliest apex predator ever documented in galactic history, moved through reinforced barriers like they were made of paper. Its massive form, covered in armor-like scales of deep black and crimson, tore through metal and energy shields with equal ease. Claws that could slice through starship hulls raked across doors and walls. And behind those terrible claws came a creature that stood 3 meters tall and radiated pure predatory malice. "By the ancient stars," Kira whispered, "we are all going to die." The Varth had a reputation that spread across every corner of known space. It had slaughtered an entire Krellian warship crew of 200 soldiers in less than an hour. It had hunted and killed species that considered themselves apex predators on their own worlds. Captured teams had lost dozens of lives just to bring this single specimen to Helios 7, and even then, they had only succeeded by sacrificing an entire moon colony as bait. The creature was not just dangerous, it was death, given physical form, and now it was loose on a station with over 300 souls. "Aboard, Commander," an officer called out. "Armed response teams Alpha and Beta have entered the lower decks." Vexler nodded, though he held little hope. "Tell them to proceed with extreme caution and maintain constant communication." For several minutes, the command center listened to the chatter of the response teams. Then Team Alpha went silent, then Team Beta, then there was nothing but static. Kira's wings buzzed faster, and she clutched her datapad like a shield. "It is hunting them," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The Varth can sense fear through pheromones, and our teams are terrified, which means they are broadcasting their locations to the creature like beacons." Vexler slammed one of his fists against the console. "Order all personnel to seal themselves in safe rooms immediately," he commanded. "No one moves through the corridors, no one tries to be a hero, and no one does anything that might draw that monster's attention." The station-wide announcement went out, and across Helios 7, hundreds of beings scrambled for shelter in the human habitation wing known as Sector 7. Daniel Carter heard the announcement and moved calmly to secure his laboratory. He was a xenobiologist, a human scientist who had dedicated his life to studying alien creatures. And he had been conducting private research when the alarms began. Daniel was not like the other scientists on the station, where they saw monsters to be caged and studied from a safe distance. He saw creatures to be understood. His colleagues called him foolish, even reckless. But Daniel believed that fear was the wrong approach to dealing with dangerous fauna, sealed his laboratory door, and checked his environmental systems. only to find that they were malfunctioning. The atmospheric controls had locked into a specific setting, flooding his room with a particular chemical mixture. He had been experimenting with it. Was meant to replicate the atmospheric conditions of various death worlds, including the one where the Varith originated. Daniel made a note to fix the malfunction later and settled into his chair to wait out the emergency in the command center. Kira suddenly gasped, "Commander, I am tracking the creature's movement through thermal imaging. Where is it heading?" Vexler demanded. Kira's compound eyes reflected the screen as she processed the data, and her voice came out as a terrified squeak. "Sector 7, Commander. The Human Habitation Wing." Lavra Mitchell, the human security officer stationed on Helia 7, stepped forward. She was a former Earth military soldier, practical and tough, with short brown hair and eyes that had seen combat on 3 different worlds. "There is a human isolated in that sector," she said, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "Daniel Cotter, the xenobiologist, and his lab is right in the creature's path." Vexler shook his head. "We cannot risk more personnel, Officer Mitchell, and the creature has already eliminated 2 armed response teams." "Then I will go alone," Lavra replied. The aliens in the room stared at her with expressions ranging from disbelief to pity. "You would die," Kira said. "The Varith has killed hundreds of beings far more powerful than a single human." Lavra checked her weapon and moved toward the door. "Humans do not abandon our own," she said simply. "That is not how we operate." Before anyone could stop her, she was gone. Vexler watched the human female disappear into the corridors, and he wondered if her species was brave or simply insane on the security feeds. The Varith continued its path toward Sector 7. Its movements were strange, almost purposeful, as if it was searching for something specific rather than simply hunting it. Past areas where terrified crew members hid behind sealed doors, and though it could surely sense their fear, it did not stop to break through and kill them. It kept moving, kept searching, kept following some invisible trail that only it could perceive in his laboratory. Daniel Carter noticed that the lights had flickered. He heard something massive moving through the corridor outside his door, and he heard the screech of claws against metal. Most beings would have felt terror in that moment. Most beings would have broadcast fear pheromones that would have drawn the creature straight to them. But Daniel Carter was not most beings. He was human. And humans had learned long ago that fear was a choice. The door to his laboratory exploded inward, torn from its frame by claws that could rend starship hulls, and through the ruined doorway stepped the most dangerous creature in the known galaxy. The Varith had found him. The command center had fallen into a terrible silence, as every screen showed the same thing. The Varith had entered the human's laboratory, and everyone expected the feed to show a quick and brutal death. Commander Vexler watched with all 4 of his hands clenched into fists, and Dr. Kira Nass had covered her compound eyes with her forelimbs because she could not bear to witness what was about to happen. But the brutal death did not come. The thermal imaging showed 2 heat signatures in the laboratory, one massive and burning hot, the other small and remarkably calm. They watched for 1 minute, then 2, then 5, and still nothing happened. "What is going on in there?" Vexler demanded. "Why has it not killed him yet?" Kira lowered her forelimbs and stared at the screen with confusion rippling through her antenna. "I do not understand," she whispered. "The creature should have torn him apart within seconds." The Varath's reputation was not built on exaggeration or myth. Every terrible story about the creature was documented fact, verified by survivors who had watched their companions die in the most horrible ways imaginable. The data files on the Varith filled entire databases with accounts of carnage and destruction on the planet Krull 7. A military outpost had detected the creature approaching there. Position 200 trained soldiers with the best weapons their civilization could produce had prepared an ambush. The Varith had walked into their trap and walked out less than an hour later, leaving nothing but bodies and blood behind. Not a single soldier had survived, and the footage recovered from their helmet cameras had been classified as too disturbing for general viewing on the colony world of Selvius Prime. The creature had appeared in a mining settlement and hunted the colonists for 3 days. It had not killed for food or territory, it had killed for sport, playing with its prey like a cruel child pulling wings from insects. The colonists had tried everything, from hiding to fighting to fleeing, and none of it had mattered. The Varth had found them all, one by one. Drawn to them by the scent of their terror fear was the creature's compass, and every frightened heartbeat was a signal fire guiding it to its next victim. Scientists theorized that the Varth could detect fear pheromones from incredible distances, and that it specifically targeted the most terrified individuals first. The more afraid you were, the faster it would find you, and the more it would enjoy the hunt. This was why the station's armed response teams had failed. The soldiers had been terrified, broadcasting their locations through every pore of their bodies, and the Varth had picked them off with casual ease. But now the creature stood in a room with a lone human, and it was not attacking. Pull up the atmospheric readings from that laboratory. Vexler commanded. Kira worked her console with trembling limbs and displayed the data on the main screen. The environmental systems in that room are malfunctioning, she reported. The atmosphere has been altered to match the chemical composition of a death world, specifically the Varath's home planet. Vexler leaned forward with sudden interest. Could that be affecting the creature's behavior? Possibly, Kira replied. The familiar scent might be confusing it, making it hesitate, but that alone should not prevent an attack. Another officer spoke up from his station. Commander, there is something else strange in these readings, and it took me a moment to identify it because I have never seen anything like it. What is it? Vexler demanded. The human, the officer said with obvious disbelief in his voice. His biological readings show no elevation in stress hormones, no increase in heart rate, no fear pheromone production whatsoever. The command center went completely silent. That is impossible, Kira said. Every living creature feels fear when facing a predator, especially one as deadly as the Varth. The readings do not lie, the officer replied. That human is not afraid. Vexler sat back in his command chair and tried to process this information. He knew that humans came from a death world called Earth, a planet so hostile that it had produced some of the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. Humans themselves were classified as persistence predators, beings who had survived by outlasting their prey through sheer stubborn endurance. But he had never imagined that they could simply choose not to feel fear in the corridors of Sector 7. Lavra Mitchell moved with careful precision toward Daniel Carter's laboratory. Her weapon was drawn, and her senses were alert to every shadow and sound around her. Unlike the alien soldiers who had gone before her, Laura had been trained to control her fear. Earth's military academies taught that fear was a tool, not a master, and that a soldier who let terror control their actions was a soldier already dead. She felt the fear, of course, because she was not insane, but she pushed it down, locked it away in a corner of her mind, and kept moving forward. The corridors were damaged from the Varath's passage, with claw marks scoring the walls and debris scattered across the floor. Emergency lighting cast everything in shades of red, and the silence was so deep that Lavra could hear her own heartbeat. She found the remains of one of the response teams and forced herself not to look too closely at what the creature had done to them. There would be time to mourn later. If she survived, the door to Daniel's laboratory was ahead, and Lara could see that it had been torn completely from its frame. She approached slowly, weapon raised, expecting to find either a gruesome scene or an active threat. What she found instead made her freeze in absolute shock. Daniel Carter sat on the floor of his laboratory with his back against the wall, and his expression was one of calm interest rather than terror. Curled up beside him, its massive head resting on his lap like a dog seeking comfort from its owner, was the Varth, the deadliest creature in the galaxy, was sleeping peacefully next to a human who was gently running his fingers across its armored scales. Laura's fear spiked despite her training, and the Varth stirred. One massive eye opened, burning red and filled with predatory intelligence, and it fixed on Laura with obvious interest. She saw it tense, saw the muscles beneath its scales coil in preparation to strike, and she knew that she was about to die. Then Daniel placed his hand on the creature's head and made a soft shushing sound. The Varth looked at him, seemed to consider something for a long moment, and then settled back down with a rumbling sound that was almost like a purr. "Keep your voice low and your fear lower," Daniel said quietly. "It can sense both." Laura stared at him with wide eyes. "What in the name of Earth is happening here?" she whispered. Daniel smiled, and it was the smile of a man who had just discovered something wonderful. "I think," he said softly, "that this creature has never met anything that was not afraid of it. And I think it does not know what to do with me." Laura looked at the sleeping monster and then back at Daniel. "The entire station thinks you are dead," she said. "Well," Daniel replied, "I am very much not, but I could use your help explaining that to the command center before they do something foolish." As if on cue, "Commander Vex," Laura's voice crackled over Laura's communication device. "Officer Mitchell, report your status immediately." Laura took a deep breath and prepared to deliver the strangest report of her military career. Laura Mitchell raised her communication device to her lips and tried to find the right words to describe what she was seeing. In all her years of military service, she had never had to file a report quite like this one. "Commander Vexler," she said slowly, "I have located Daniel Carter, and he is alive and unharmed." The relief in the commander's voice was immediate. "Excellent news, Officer Mitchell. But what about the Varth? And where is the creature now?" Laura looked at the massive predator sleeping peacefully with its head on Daniel's lap, and she almost laughed at the absurdity of the situation. "The creature is here with us." "Commander." There was a pause. "Repeat that." "Officer Mitchell, the Varth is in the laboratory with Daniel Carter," Laura said, keeping her voice carefully neutral. "And it appears to be sleeping on him?" The silence that followed stretched for nearly 30 seconds when Vexler spoke again. His voice had gone very strange. "Did you say sleeping, Officer Mitchell?" "Yes, Commander, sleeping, as in eyes closed and making purring sounds." In the command center, every officer turned to stare at the thermal imaging display with expressions of complete disbelief. The two heat signatures remained exactly where they had been, close together and showing no signs of conflict whatsoever. Dr. Kira Noss approached the main screen with her antenna twitching in scientific fascination. "This is unprecedented," she said. "The Varth has never displayed docile behavior toward any species, not once in all of recorded history." Vexler's mind raced through possibilities and found none that made sense. "Officer Mitchell, can you get the human out of there safely?" Daniel's voice came through the communication device, calm and steady. "I would not recommend that approach, Commander, and if I move suddenly, the creature may wake and react poorly to finding itself surrounded by beings broadcasting fear. Then, what do you suggest?" Vexler demanded. "For now, everyone stays calm and nobody makes any sudden moves," Daniel replied. "I believe I can explain what is happening here, but I need you to trust me." Trust was not something Vexler gave easily, especially not when the deadliest creature in the galaxy was involved. But the human had survived longer than anyone could have expected, and he seemed to understand something about the Varth that no one else had ever grasped. "Explain quickly." Vexler commanded. Daniel kept his hand on the Varath's head as he spoke, maintaining the physical contact that seemed to keep the creature calm. The Vorath is an apex predator from a death world, he began, and everything about its evolution has been shaped by hunting and being hunted, which means it perceives the universe through the lens of predator and prey. Lavra stood very still nearby, controlling her breathing and fighting to keep her fear suppressed. When the Vorath encounters another being, it senses the fear response and categorizes that being as prey, Daniel continued. Fear is the trigger that activates its hunting instincts, and the stronger the fear, the more intense its predatory drive becomes. We know all of this, Kira said over the communication channel. But how does that explain why it has not killed you? Because I am not afraid of it, Daniel said simply. The statement hung in the air like something impossible. That cannot be the only factor, Vexler argued. Surely other beings have attempted to suppress their fear responses. Attempting to suppress fear and actually not feeling fear are two very different things, Daniel replied. The Vorath can sense the chemical signatures of terror even when a being tries to hide it. And no species has ever been able to completely eliminate their fear response in the presence of such an overwhelming predator. But you have, Lavra said quietly. Understanding dawning in her eyes, Daniel nodded. Humans evolved on Earth, a death world where we were surrounded by predators far larger and more dangerous than ourselves. And we survived not by being the biggest or the strongest, but by being the most adaptable. He stroked the Vorath scales gently as he continued. We learned to work with dangerous animals rather than simply fleeing from them. And we domesticated wolves, horses, elephants, and countless other creatures that could easily have killed us. The command center listened in fascinated silence. To do that, we had to develop the ability to consciously override our fear instincts, Daniel explained. Fear is still there as a warning system, but we can choose whether to act on it or not. And that choice is something unique to humans. The Vorath shifted slightly, and everyone tensed. Daniel waited until it settled again before continuing. When this creature entered my laboratory, I looked at it not as a monster to be feared, but as an animal to be understood. And it did not know how to process that response. So it just went to sleep? Vexler asked skeptically. It went to sleep because for the first time in its life, it was not surrounded by prey, Daniel said. My laboratory atmosphere replicates its home world. My body language is non-threatening, and my scent carries no fear markers, which means I registered as something familiar and safe rather than something to hunt. Kira's antennae were practically vibrating with excitement. This is extraordinary, she said. If what you are saying is true, then the key to handling the Vorath has never been weapons or containment fields, but simply the absence of fear. Easier said than done, Lavra muttered. Most species cannot just turn off their survival instincts. Most species are not human, Daniel replied with a slight smile. Commander Vexler had been listening carefully, and his tactical mind was already working through the implications. Even if what you say is true, we cannot leave the creature loose on the station indefinitely, and we need to return it to containment before another incident occurs. I agree, Daniel said. And I believe I can lead it back to the containment sector peacefully. Absolutely not, Vexler responded immediately. The risk is too great. The risk of not trying is greater, Daniel argued. Right now, the creature is calm. But if it wakes to find armed teams surrounding it and terrified beings everywhere it looks, it will go into hunting mode, and we will have a massacre on our hands. Lavra stepped forward. Making a decision. I will go with him, Commander. Officer Mitchell. I cannot authorize this, Vexler protested. With respect, Commander. You are not going to stop me either. The Vorath's eye opened again, and it looked at Lara with that same predatory intelligence. She met its gaze without flinching. Drawing on every ounce of training and willpower she possessed, the creature studied her for a long moment. And something shifted in its expression. It was not recognition exactly, but perhaps acknowledgement. Here was another being that could control its fear. Another creature that was more than simple prey. The Varth closed its eye and settled back against Daniel. "I think it likes you," Daniel said quietly. Laura was not sure if that was a good thing or not, but she was committed now. "All right, Carter," she said. "Tell me what we need to do." The Galactic Union Council had been observing the situation aboard Helios 7 through secure communication channels, and their verdict came swiftly: allow the human to attempt his approach, the council's spokesperson announced. But if the creature shows any sign of aggression, we will authorize immediate destruction of the station. Commander Vexlor received this message with a mix of relief and dread. Relief that he was not alone in making this impossible decision, and dread at the knowledge that hundreds of lives now rested on the actions of two humans and the goodwill of a monster. "You heard the council," he said over the communication channel to Daniel and Laura. "You have authorization to proceed, but know that if anything goes wrong, we will not have time to evacuate before the station is destroyed." "Understood, Commander," Daniel replied. "Please have all personnel remain in their secure locations and keep the corridors clear, because we cannot afford any surprises." The station-wide announcement went out once again, warning everyone to stay hidden and silent in the laboratory. Daniel began the delicate process of rousing the Varth from its sleep. He moved slowly, speaking in a low and steady voice that carried no threat. "Time to wake up," he said softly. "We need to move now, and I need you to trust me." The Varath's eyes opened, both of them this time, and the full weight of its attention focused on Daniel. Those burning red eyes held intelligence beyond what most scientists had ever credited the creature with. And Daniel found himself wondering just how much the Varth actually understood. The creature rose from its resting position, and Laura had to fight every instinct in her body not to step back, standing at its full height. The Varth was even more terrifying than the security footage had suggested. 3 meters of armored muscle and razor-sharp claws, with a body built for nothing but killing. Its head nearly brushed the ceiling of the laboratory, and when it stretched, the sound of its scales shifting was like metal grinding against metal. "Easy now," Daniel said, rising slowly to his feet and positioning himself beside the creature. "We are just going for a walk." He began moving toward the door, and after a moment of hesitation, the Varth followed it, moved with a grace that seemed impossible for something so large. Each step silent and deliberate. Laura fell into position behind them, her weapon holster because she knew it would be useless anyway. "Mitchell to command," she reported quietly. "We are moving out of the laboratory and heading toward the containment sector." "Acknowledged," Vexlor replied. "All corridors between your position and containment have been cleared, and we are tracking your progress through thermal imaging." The journey through Helios 7 was unlike anything the station had ever experienced. Daniel walked at a steady pace, neither too fast nor too slow, and the Varth moved beside him like a shadow. Its head swung from side to side as it took in its surroundings, and occasionally it would pause to examine something that caught its attention. Each time it paused, Daniel would stop with it, patient and calm, waiting until the creature was ready to continue. They passed through sections of the station where crew members huddled behind sealed doors. The fear was palpable, seeping through the walls despite every attempt to contain it. The Varth sensed it too, and its body language shifted each time it detected a new source of terror. Muscles would tense, claws would extend slightly, and that predatory light would return to its eyes. But then it would look at Daniel, who remained steadfastly unafraid, and something would shift. The tension would ease. The claws would retract, and the creature would continue following the human through the corridors. There Kira Noss watched from the command center with her datapad, recording everything. "I'm calling this the Carter Protocol," she announced to no one in particular. The deliberate absence of fear as a handling technique for dangerous specimens. You are writing a research paper right now? Wexler asked incredulously. This is the most significant xenobiological discovery of our generation. Kira replied without taking her eyes off the screen. If this works, it will change everything we know about handling apex predators. The commander had no response. To that, he simply watched the impossible procession, making its way through his station and prayed to whatever gods might be. Listening, Daniel found himself thinking about his childhood. On Earth, as they walked, he had grown up on a farm in the American Midwest, surrounded by animals that could have easily killed him if they had chosen to. His grandfather had been a horse trainer, a man who believed that any animal could be gentled with patience and the right approach. Animals can sense what you are feeling, his grandfather had told him once. If you are afraid, they will be afraid, and afraid animals are dangerous animals. So the first thing you have to learn is how to be calm even when everything in you wants to run. Daniel had learned that lesson well, applying it first to horses and cattle, then to more exotic creatures as his career took him into the wider galaxy, but he had never imagined that he would one day use those skills on something like the Vorath. He reached a junction where a frightened crew member had apparently not received the lockdown order. A young Selvian officer stood frozen in the corridor ahead, his insectoid body trembling so violently that his wings made a buzzing sound. The Vorath's attention snapped to him instantly. Every predatory instinct in the creature awakened at once, and it took a step toward the terrified alien. "Do not move," Daniel commanded, his voice cutting through the tension. "Look at me." Not at him. The Vorath's head turned toward Daniel, and for a long moment, predator and human locked eyes. Daniel did not blink, did not waver, did not show even the slightest trace of fear. He simply stood there, calm and resolute, like a rock in the middle of a raging storm. "He is not worth your time," Daniel said quietly. "Come on, we have somewhere to be." The creature held his gaze for what felt like an eternity. Then, incredibly, it turned away from the terrified Selvian and resumed following Daniel. Laura quickly gestured for the frozen officer to flee, which he did with impressive speed. "That was close," she breathed. "It will get easier," Daniel replied. Though he was not entirely sure he believed it, they continued on, step by careful step, through corridors that had been designed to hold the galaxy's most dangerous creatures. The irony was not lost on Daniel that the most dangerous creature of all was walking freely beside him, held in check by nothing more than the absence of fear. Finally, they reached the entrance to the containment sector. The massive doors loomed ahead, and beyond them was the chamber where the Vorath had been imprisoned before its escape. Daniel stopped, and the Vorath stopped with him. The creature looked at those doors, and something changed in its expression. It recognized this place, and the memories associated with it were clearly not pleasant. Low growl rumbled from its throat, and its claws extended fully for the first time since leaving the laboratory. "Daniel," Lavra said warningly. "I see it," Daniel replied. "It remembers this place, and it does not want to go back." The Vorath turned to look at Daniel, and in those burning red eyes, he saw something he had not expected. He saw fear. The deadliest creature in the galaxy was afraid of returning to its cage. The Vorath stood before the containment doors with every muscle in its massive body tensed for battle. Gone was the docile creature that had slept peacefully on Daniel's lap. In its place was the apex predator that had terrorized the galaxy. Claws extended and eyes burning with a mixture of fear and rage. Daniel understood immediately what had changed. Containment chamber was not just a cage to this creature. It was a place of torment, where it had been poked and prodded and tested by scientists who treated it as nothing more than a specimen. Every memory associated with that chamber was one of captivity and pain. Commander Wexler, Daniel said into his communication device. We have a problem. I can see that, the commander replied grimly. The creature's aggression readings are spiking beyond anything we recorded before. And the council is demanding we activate the station's self-destruct sequence. Laura's hand moved toward her weapon instinctively. Though she knew it would do no good. There has to be another way, she said. There is no other way, Vexler responded. If the creature will not return to containment willingly, we cannot risk it escaping again. And the only option is total destruction. Daniel looked at the Varth. At this magnificent and terrible creature that the galaxy had decided was too dangerous to exist outside of a cage. He thought about everything he had learned. In his years of studying alien fauna, he thought about his grandfather's lessons on patience and trust, and he made a decision. Lower the containment. Field settings, he said to command. Center went silent. What did you just say? Vexler demanded. The containment chamber, Daniel explained. It is configured as a prison, with high energy barriers and suppression fields that cause constant discomfort. So I need you to lower those settings and make it more like a habitat than a cell. That is insane, Kira protested. If we lower the containment settings, the creature will be able to escape even more easily than before. The creature does not want to escape, Daniel replied. It just does not want to suffer. He stepped closer to the Varth, close enough to touch if he raised his hand. The creature's head swung toward him, and those burning eyes fixed on his face with terrible intensity. I know you understand more than they think you do, Daniel said quietly, speaking directly to the Varth. I know that cage has caused you pain, and I know you would rather die fighting than go back to that, the Varth growled. But it was not the growl of a predator preparing to strike. It was the sound of a wounded animal warning others to keep their distance. But I'm not going to let them hurt you anymore, Daniel continued. So I need you to trust me one more time. He turned back to the containment doors and walked toward them. Daniel, what are you doing? Laura called out. I am going inside. Daniel replied simply. He passed through the massive doors and entered the containment chamber. It was a vast space, designed to hold the deadliest creature in the galaxy. But it felt more like a torture chamber than a home. The air crackled with suppression fields, and the walls hummed with energy barriers that would cause constant low-level pain to anything trapped within them. Commander, Daniel said, lower the settings now. Vexler hesitated for only a moment before making his choice, whatever happened next. He could not ignore the courage of this human who was willing to risk everything for a creature that most would consider a monster. Lowering containment settings, he announced. May the stars have mercy on us all. The hum of the energy barriers faded. The crackling of the suppression fields died away. The chamber became simply a large room. Uncomfortable, but no longer torturous, Daniel sat down on the floor, just as he had done in his laboratory, hours before. Hours to Varth, standing at the threshold of the chamber. And he waited. The creature did not move for a long time. It studied Daniel with those intelligent eyes, weighing this strange human who showed no fear against everything it had experienced in this terrible place. Then, slowly, it stepped forward. One massive clawed foot crossed the threshold. Then another. The Varth entered the containment chamber of its own free will for the first time in its captive existence. It circled Daniel once, then twice, its head turning to examine every corner of the space. Then it settled down beside him, its massive form curling around his smaller one, like a guardian rather than a prisoner. Activate the containment field, Daniel said. Lowest settings that will still maintain security. The field flickered to life around them. Barely visible, more suggestion than barrier. The Varth noticed it and tensed briefly. But when no pain came, it relaxed again. Well, Laura said from outside the chamber, her voice carrying a tone of disbelief. I guess that worked. The epilogue. Came 3 months later. HFY had been transformed from a research prison into something new. The sign above the main entrance now read Galactic Fauna Research and Rehabilitation Center, and at its head was a human xenobiologist named Daniel Carter the Varath, now called Rex by Daniel, after the Earth creature it sometimes reminded him of had become the living proof that even the deadliest creatures could respond to something other than fear. Scientists from across the galaxy came to study Daniel's methods, and slowly, tentatively, they began applying his principles to other dangerous specimens. Not all of them succeeded, because not every species had the human ability to consciously override their fear instincts, but enough did that the Carter Protocol became recognized as a legitimate approach to xenobiology. Commander Vexler had remained on the station, his skepticism slowly transforming into something that might have been respect. He watched Daniel interact with Rex each day, and he marveled at the bond between human and monster. One evening, as Daniel sat with Rex in the habitat that had replaced the old containment chamber, a delegation from a frightened species arrived at the station. Their colony was being terrorized by a creature they could not control, and they had heard rumors of a human who could tame the untamable. Vexler met them at the docking bay and directed them to Daniel without hesitation. The alien delegation found the humans sitting peacefully beside the most dangerous creature in the known galaxy, scratching Rex behind what might have been its ears. "We were told you could help us," the delegation leader said nervously. "But we do not understand how, because no being can face such dangers without fear." Daniel smiled and looked at Rex, who rumbled contentedly at his touch. "You are thinking about this wrong," he said gently. "Fear is not the enemy, and it never has been." He stood, and Rex stood with him, a guardian shadow that followed wherever he led. "Fear is a tool," Daniel explained. "It exists to warn us of danger, but it should never control us, because the moment we let fear make our choices, we become prey." The delegation stared at him with expressions of confusion and hope. "Humans learned this lesson long ago," Daniel continued. "We shared our world with creatures that could crush us, tear us apart, poison us with a single bite. But we did not just survive them, because we befriended them." He placed his hand on Rex's head, and the deadliest creature in the galaxy leaned into his touch like a dog seeking affection. "The most dangerous thing in the universe is not claws or venom or strength," Daniel said. "It is fear itself, and humans have spent our entire history learning to choose something else." The delegation leader looked at Rex, at this monster that had become a companion, and something shifted in their expression. "What do you choose instead?" they asked. Daniel smiled. "Understanding," he said. "Patience, and just a little bit of stubborn human courage." He gestured toward the door of the habitat. "Now come with me," he said, "and let me tell you about your creature, because once we understand what it fears, we can figure out how to help it." As he walked away with Rex padding beside him and a delegation of hopeful aliens following behind, Daniel thought about his grandfather's old lessons one more time. The old man had been right all along. Any creature could be reached if you approached it with patience and the absence of fear. Even monsters, especially monsters